Hey BookTube, back for another video. This video is going to be introducing a concept that you've probably heard me mention before, and especially if you've seen my shelf tours, you'll have seen that they're heavily skewed towards classical literature, and there's a reason for that. And the reason I'll be explaining to you today. So if you've been following my channel for a while, you will notice that I've made old videos on this topic, which is the Western Canon Reading List, which is a list that I've referred to in a number of videos, and I've actually introduced it before in my older videos when I was still using my laptop as a camera, where my videos were of noticeably inferior quality. So I thought I'm going to introduce it more comprehensively this time. This will be the introductory video, so I'll be explaining what exactly the list is, why I made it, and how I made it, and then just going forward, other videos I'd like to make going through my list itself. So we'll jump right in. First is, what is it? What is the list? Well, from the title, Western Canon Reading List, it's a reading list based off of the Western Canon. And I'm not going to go into what is the Western Canon or what makes up the Western Canon, other than my own barometer, which is spheres of influence. But it was also based particularly on my own interests. So I'm reading chronologically through the Western Canon, from the earliest influential pieces of literature all the way down to the 20th century, and my list is quite long, and it is divided by periods in history. So I divide it up into periods of history, and then I have all the major works in subsequent order. Generally speaking, it's not exclusively. Like, for example, when we get to the 19th century, the 19th century, then I usually mix it based on, or subject matter is usually based off of by country. So all the French writers, the German writers, and the English writers are clumped together, even if they jump around in chronological, chronological order. But I'm just going to go through, before I give some context on how I made this list and why I ended up making this list. I want to give just a brief heading of all the headings of my list. So it starts off with the early Greek age, which I just include a little bit of prehistory works in there too, like the Epic of Gilgamesh. But other than that, it's early Greek age, starting with Homer, and then it moves into the Latin age, which is Roman literature, and then from that we move into the Christian age, which begins, of course, with the Bible, and then we have the Middle Ages, which is fairly long, and then we have the Renaissance and Pre-Reformation section, moving into the Reformation age, which you could also continue as also an extension of the Renaissance, but I have it as its own list. And then I have the English Renaissance, which includes a lot of the distinguished English works, and then we have the 1600s Europe, and the 1700s Europe and rise of America, and then we have the 1800s Europe and America, and then we have the 20th century on that list. So it's very, very generalized by time period, and it's a list that I curated on my own, but I'm going to go through that first. But before I go into that, how I curated this list, because I'm not following any specific list, I want to give some context on how I actually made this list. So I made this list in 2021, back in November, and during that year I had started, well, everything started in September of 2021, when Steve Donahue, the booktuber, he was giving hints at hosting a Proust-tober read-along for October in 2021, where he was going to read Proust for the last time. He's never been a fan of Proust, and he wanted to give him one more chance. And I had the huge box set of Proust, which I've seen in some other people's channels too, where they have it in the background. And Proust is always one of those books that people are always thinking of, like, I mean, if you're any way interested in classics, Proust is like this one big, like, book that sits on the shelf that, or in the back of your mind, as maybe one book that you'll try at least, even if you don't read the whole thing. And I was no different. I had bought the big box set of Proust, and that was sitting on my shelf, and so I thought, what better way to challenge myself than to read this whole work with Steve. And if you follow his channel, you know that never actually happened, and it became sort of a joke throughout his channel. You know, Proust is going to be Proust January or Proust December, because he kept putting it off, and he never ended up doing the read-along of Proust. But I did. I started reading in September already, because I thought I would get a head start for Proust-tober. And even though as Proust-tober came and went with no read-along of Proust, I continued reading Proust all the way up until, I think, May of the next year, because I was also reading stuff for classes, my university classes at the time, which is also an important context. I was in university doing my undergrad, and I was had full-time schedule of classes, most of them literature classes, or at least literature and history, so they involved lots of writing and reading on their own. So I was only really reading Proust during that time, and I was reading Proust quite slowly. But there was an important period where in November of that year, my professors went on strike, and they went on strike indefinitely, which ended up being for a full month. But we had no idea it was going to be like that, and this was during the era of COVID university, so everything was online, and professors had to take all their content off their our online website that we have, where our university website. So based off of their union because of the strike. So it wasn't like we could just independently continue on our classes while the professors were on strike. So I had just a full month of free time, and I was already reading Proust, and my reading confidence was getting fairly high. So I thought I would try another project, and I did a lot of research into the Western Canon. It was boosted or influenced based off of Steve Donahue's now famous Western Canon Starter Kit. If you have not watched that, that's must viewing for BookTube, where he goes through all the different ages in history and gives you the essential works where you could read just to get the basic tenets of the Western Canon without having to go to classes or without having any kind of degree, and which you could almost certainly complete within a year. And so I took that list, and then I consulted other lists too. So there's another famous list, which is Harold Bloom's Western Canon List. Though I did not, I took it as an influence, picking and choosing of what my interests were and what I wanted to read. His was a lot more comprehensive and a lot more choosing obscure authors for obscurity's sake almost. But then I also consulted the two big reprint classics sets, such as the Britannica Great Books set, and also the Harvard Classics set. But those, and that also brings me to the emphasis, my focus of this reading list. The focus is on literature, on philosophy, on political philosophy, and less on poetry, and very much leaving out science and math literature, because those are subject matters that not only don't very much interest me, but they also are sort of beyond me, and I think just including philosophy itself, which is in some ways beyond me, is enough on its own. So I left a lot of those out, keeping only some of them, like Darwin is on the list, for example. But and so that's really the sources of my list. But then I also did a lot of my own research and research into literature that I should include, and seeing how it was influenced. And you'll see that when I go through the list with you, also that, like for example, works that you've never heard of will be on this list, but have had their day in the limelight. For example, I've looked up, maybe if you know the Greek age, Xenophon, who is more famous for his accounts of, or his history accounts that follow off after Thucydides' history, which was incomplete, and then his Anabasis, which is his account of an expedition of Greek mercenaries going into the Persian realm and trying to help one of the royal princes try to take over the kingship, and then ultimately failing. And then those are his two famous works, but then he's also got another work on the education of Cyrus, which has had his day as an influential work on the education of princes. And it's kind of a weird book in the ancient world, because it's considered fiction, like it's not considered like it was supposed to be true, but yet it's didactic. I mean, I haven't read it myself yet. I will be reading it soon, but it's sort of an example of what's on this list. So then I wanted to go into why I made this list. Like, why make this such an enormous reading project, which has, of course, taken me quite some time, or that will be taking me quite some time as well. And I want to read to you a blurb that I wrote, justifying this list to myself when I first created it. So when I created this list, I wanted to make a justification of why I'm doing this, sort of as a way to remind myself, but as a way to orient myself, but also as a way to introduce it, or to explain to other people what the purpose of this list is. And so it's only, about 2 paragraphs, so I'll read it here. It says, I have always been a lover of literature in general, and when I realized how much literature in each era relies on the works of the past, I really became interested in reading the most influential works of the Western canon. This is my attempt at learning, and hopefully loving, the history of literature. Another motive is my interest in political philosophy, and to a lesser extent, philosophy in general. It is my opinion that the ideas that have shaped past governments and cultures is crucial to understanding my own period in history. I want to read what so many thinkers before me have read and found important, and how it contributed to Western ideas. Regardless if philosophers like Aristotle, St. Thomas Aquinas, Immanuel Kant, and Hegel, and many others were playing philosophic word games, those ideas have been interpreted and reinterpreted in ways that have affected how people see themselves, and how governments treat others and other nations. I've always thought that ideas have consequences, and all these writers and thinkers listed here have contributed to history's conversation that has birthed my present day. I want to immerse myself in this conversation. The biggest goal is to understand how Western society grew and evolved through its literature and philosophy, leading to today. I tend to read secondary literature that adds to this conversation, but that is not my main priority. I want to read the words of the real people in history, trying to make sense of their situation. Hopefully, I can get more from secondary literature once I've read their source material. And so that's the blurb that I made. Keep in mind that this was a blurb that I made when I was back in 2021, probably early 2022, because I did spend a year creating this list and revising it. The bare bones of that list was made during that year that month when my professors were on strike, but I kept adding, and this list kept evolving and expanding throughout the year until I actually started this list officially in September 2022. And now we are in 2025, and I'm still not out of the Greek age. But that's a topic for my next video. So that means that but before I talk about going forward, I want to mention what is missing in that blurb, or at least what is woefully absent, at least in my approach to this Western canon list that I've created. And I did gesture to it when I said that this is my attempt at learning and hopefully loving the history of literature. But from the very start, my whole intent was learning. learning, like not enjoying. Even when I was reading Proust, I didn't particularly enjoy the experience. Though now, as I look back, I find a lot in Proust that I now enjoy, and I know for a fact that when I reread Proust, I'll enjoy him a lot better. But so much of my reading, especially in this list, has been about learning, about trying to, uh, you know, approaching these works as something that you need to read because it's influential, not so much as I want to read because it's fun. And that's how my thinking has shifted, because when I started this in 2022, I wasn't going full out on this list. It took me a while. I would read a work here or there, and it would take me a while to read the work because I was reading other things that were more interesting to me on the side. And that led to a lot of conflicting thoughts. Like, I really do want to read this list. I want to accomplish reading this list. But what are my motivations for doing so? Is it just to be well read? It's not to be like a snobbish person at parties, because I don't go to parties, and I don't brag about my reading to anyone, except for here on BookTube. But the purpose of this list, and what is the purpose? And so I've had to shift the purpose in my mind, and I've had to refocus it, especially when it came to reading Plato and then Aristotle, because I didn't find Plato very interesting at all, and Plato at times waxed and waned in my interest, but when it came to Aristotle, I was brought full stop. Like, Aristotle is not fun to read. He's not fun to understand either. And so then what am I doing reading Aristotle's work if I'm reading a book I'm not enjoying? And I kept asking myself that as I read slowly through his physics. And it took me like a month to read through the physics, just reading like 5-10 pages here or there. And then I buckled down and read the next book, the Metaphysics, in about a week. And there was a certain shift in my mind there where, like, even though Aristotle isn't enjoyable to read, this is fun. This is fun digging down into this work and encountering it, not so much as a study, because I'm not studying these works. I'm approaching them as casual readers, as a casual reader, and hoping to just see what's in them. And now that has shifted my focus to, I want to not just understand them and to see what's there, but I want to love these works. I want to meet them where they are at and see what there is to enjoy. And I think that has done a lot of benefit for me in my current reading. I'm currently reading The Ethics by Aristotle, but I feel invigorated and very much interested in going forward with this project, a lot more than I was, say, even a few months ago, because I look forward to all these different voices just speaking up from the past, of course through modern translations, because I can't read any of the works in their original, but I can read the best that I've got with the resources that I've got in my current age, in my own period of history, and I want to take advantage of that, and I want to enjoy these works, and I want to end up loving some of these works, and love as much as I can, because not all authors, even in the Western Canon, are, say, worthy of love, though that's usually in accordance to personal taste. But I do really want to love these works, and I look forward to completing this list, and I've resigned myself that this will take a while. This is not I started in 2022, and I'm here I am in the beginning of 2025, and I'm still, I read maybe 7 or 8 authors on this list. Some of them are short, some of them are long. But I feel quite invigorated, even though I do get impatient sometimes. Like, I am a novelist reader at heart, and maybe I'll make a video explaining that some other time, but I am a novelist, or novelist reader at heart, and so I'm always yearning, or sometimes I find myself yearning to be in the 18th or 19th century when the novel is starting to kick off the ground, and just sink myself in those works, and then just read, George Eliot and Dickens and Hawthorne and Melville, and just immerse myself in the history of literature in the terms of the novel, which is fairly recent in the terms of the history of literature. But no, I'm looking forward to reading the rest of the Greeks and reading through the Roman literature, which I hope to get to this year. And I've resigned myself to that this will take time, and that it's worthy of that time, as long as I'm enjoying what I'm reading, or at least enjoying the process, even if the work itself is difficult and makes me want to pull my hair out sometimes, and if it makes me feel incredibly stupid, which reading a lot of Aristotle has done quite a lot of, even though I find him a weirdly compelling author now that I've read a number of works by him, and hardly understood most of them. But yeah, so going forward, what am I going to be doing going forward? Going forward, I want to make certain videos on each period. So I did read to you the period of, like, the headings that I had for my list. And then for each period, I want to make a video on that period, going through my list, starting with, of course, the early Greek age, which I have here, which begins my list, and then just going through, making a video for each, going through the authors, author by author and work by work, and then explaining maybe why they're there, and then also a little bit the editions that I have, because part of my research for this list was looking up editions, because I am an English-only reader, so basically all literature prior to maybe Thomas Mallory's works on Arthur, I think anything before that I have to read through in translation, even Chaucer up to a point, though I do want to tackle Chaucer this time around in the original. We'll see how that goes, but that's way in the distant future for me. I still have lots of literature to get to until then. But yeah, I would like to go through the very specifics of my list in subsequent videos. So I'll start off with the Greek age, and then I'll make another video on the Latin age, and then I'll make a video on the Christian age, and then explain my choices of why I have them in the order that they are, and also why I include works that probably you haven't heard of unless you are you've done research on this yourself, or you're I don't know, more well versed on the Western canon than I am. And that's what I'd like to do, and maybe that would be boring, I don't know, but let me know what you think in the comments. And yeah, this is my Western canon list, and I'm fully willing to share it with other people. I have thought about maybe attaching a PDF of my list in a Google Drive link down below, but I'm not so sure if I will. I might do that after I've made it all my lists, all my videos for all the lists, but we'll see. Maybe you can also let me know if that would be of interest to you, because this is not a list that I'm trying to hide from people or anything like that. This is an open list that I just curated for myself out of curiosity, and so yeah, that's my Western Canon list, or my Western Canon Reading List is what I call it, Western Canon Reading List, and it's very individualized. It has the marks of other lists and everything, but I'm quite pleased with it, and I'm looking forward to not only reading more of it, but also sharing that experience here on BookTube. So thank you, BookTube, and we'll see you in the next video.